Welcome to the Enterprise Excellence Podcast, where our purpose is to help create a better future. Learn from our world's experts how to improve your organisation sustainably. Learn how to achieve and sustain an excellence journey for yourself, others, and the planet.
And I'm your host, Brad Jevons, coming to you from Brisbane, Australia. Welcome to episode 84 of the Enterprise Excellence Podcast. I'm so pleased to welcome back Mr Chris Butterworth, one of our world's leading experts in creating a sustainable continuous improvement culture within organisations. Today we talk about Chris's new book in partnership with Peter Hines and Morgan Jones called Why Bother? Why and how to assess your continuous improvement culture. Let's get into the episode. Chris, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Brad. You're welcome. And many thanks for your kind words.
I appreciate it, mate. I'm so looking forward to the chat today. Hey, Chris, what we met on the show a year or so ago. But mate, what have you been up to since we last spoke?
A lot of work finishing the book. It's surprising how long it takes to write a book, and it's really great to get that into print. And I've also been enjoying the opportunity to travel the world virtually. So I've been doing lots of assessments with teams around the world and various organizations and sites, and really enjoying meeting all those different people and learning a lot myself from each one. So that's been good fun.
Yeah. It's a new world, isn't it? With being able to take your knowledge and capability and people draw on it from all parts of the world through technology like Zoom.
Yeah, absolutely. And being able to adapt it and learn, and it's not quite the same, but you can still get a really good experience.
Yeah. Oh, it's a totally new world than what we were dealing with 2 years ago. Chris, what are you focused on now? Like, you've got the book coming out or released. What's moving forward for you?
Yeah, so working on a new series of papers with Peter Hines and two other collaborators, Caroline Greenlee and Cheryl Jekyll, and we're focusing on what Peter's called the people value stream. So we've got a paper coming out in an international journal in a couple of months' time, and we're currently working on the next one. So it's about a series of 6 or 7 papers, all about the focus on explicitly on people. And for example, the next paper is all about physical and mental well-being in the workplace and how to create that for people. So that's a really interesting area. And I'm also continuing to do quite a few virtual assessments and kicking around a few ideas with potential co-authors for the next book.
Oh, nice. Well, mate, I'm looking forward to talking about the book that's just out now, Why Bother? And the key question for me, mate, and for the listeners is, why bother to assess your organization's continuous improvement culture? Like, I know so many organizations, they go down a continuous improvement journey, and they don't really assess it. They just sort of fly through it. What does creating an assessment approach and bothering about that actually create for you?
It's for me, it's been a real learning over the last few years just how critical this is as a system for sustainability. And I look at the organizations that have managed to embed a culture of continuous improvement. This is one of the key things that they do. What the reason for the title, I've had quite a few questions about the title. And the reason for that is that often the reaction when people say, we're going to do an assessment, they immediately think it's an audit and they go, oh, no, not something else from head office. What are we going to have to do this time? It's just going to create a lot of extra work for us and it's a waste of time. And unfortunately, quite a few are. And we'll go into the book, the reasons why that is, what we can do to avoid those traps. And the other issue is that lean assessments, or more often called lean audits, are often just that. They're an audit of the application of a particular tool or a suite of tools. And they only get you so far. We firmly believe that you can't actually embed a culture of improvement just by assessing the tools. We've got to start looking at the behaviours in the systems. So what we're doing here is saying that let's look at, have we got ideal behaviours? If we've not got ideal behaviours, why? What is it that needs to change in the systems that help drive those ideal behaviours? So yes, we do need to look at the tools as well, but they're only a very small part of what we need to assess. So fundamentally, what we're doing here is a plan, do, check, act of our continuous improvement culture. We plan to implement some changes. How's it going? Let's check. And we're going to do them, let's check them, and then act and revise it and refine it. So it's a very high level PDCA process. And as part of that, we need to understand what's working well, because we then need to replicate it and build on it. And really importantly, we need to understand what's not working as we expected. And there are always things that don't work as we expect.
Yeah.
If we don't have an assessment system to find that out, the danger is it just fades away and we suddenly still say, oh, hang on, this hasn't worked. What's gone wrong? And so we've got to constantly check it. And I like to think of a mindset of experimentation. So when we're doing an improvement, chances are it's might not work. So think of it as an experiment. And if the experiment didn't work, fine. What have we learned from it? If everything works without us really realizing why, what are we going to learn? So let's understand that actually it probably won't work in some areas. Take that as a positive and do a really good lessons learned from it.
Yeah. I think, Chris, I've been myself involved in deploying continuous improvement journeys in organizations. And you look at it, mate, and you look at sport, right? No one goes to start to play a game and they're instantly at their peak of their game. You don't pick up a tennis racket and all of a sudden you're Roger Federer.
Great analogy. Yeah. So you got to keep practicing.
Why is it, do you think, but in organizations that we think that, okay, let's deploy lean or agile or Six Sigma, and we think that we're going to roll out some training and coach, and then all of a sudden everyone's going to be Roger Federer, or it's just going to keep going forever? What is that?
The triumph of hope over experience.
Yeah.
Well, it takes time. It takes time to change culture. It takes a lot of managerial time and investment of the most precious resource, which is their time. And there's probably a tipping point as you go through levels of maturity. We talk through 5 stages of maturity, where 1 is just starting, and 5 is where it's embedded as a way of life. And if you get the top end of stage 2, stage 3, what we see is many organizations, they're at an inflection point at that stage, and it might be 18 months, 2 years in, but you can't carry on doing exactly the same thing at that point that you've always done, unless you actually, especially if you've started implementing tools or a program. If you then continue to do the same thing, it will just die and fade away. At that point, tipping point, you need to change the emphasis significantly to focus in on culture and systems. Because that is how you then embed it.
Yeah.
And that's one of the other reasons for why bother looking at it. What is it that we need to do to drive the right behaviors in the organization?
Yeah. Chris, I've seen a lot of lean assessment tools where they are assessing purely, 5S or Kanban or some elements of just in time or whatever it may be. What is the difference when it comes to assessing behaviors and systems versus the traditional tools and technique type assessment that most of us are aware of?
Well, if you think about tools and techniques, you're assessing the what people do. What are they doing? When you look at systems, you're assessing how do they do it. And when you look at behavior, you're really looking at why are they doing it. And it's far more powerful to look at those why and hows. And they're connected. They're all connected. I'm not saying never assess the tools at all. I'm saying we need to take to another level and assess systems and behaviors. And systems will drive behaviors. So we think about it when at a very small level, even whenever we make a continuous improvement change, we're going to change a process or a system. Otherwise, nothing's going to change. So we're going to change the way people work. And we might give them a different tool, but usually we're also going to do that as part of a system change. So when we're going to make that change, what do we sit down and say, okay, well, what are the ideal behaviors that we want as a consequence? In fact, even before that, do we say, what's the purpose we're trying to achieve here with this change? And what's the purpose of this system? When we're clear on the purpose of the improvement or the system, we can then say, well, what are the ideal behaviours that we are looking for that will deliver that purpose? And when we're clear on those, then we can make sure we design the system that supports them. Now, will we get it right all the time? Probably not. We want 100% right. So again, that's why we need to assess it and say, okay, well, we thought that that would drive X behaviour. It hasn't. Why not? Or it's not quite what we were looking for. Why not? What do we need to adjust in the system to get the behaviours closer to ideal? That's what we're assessing.
Yeah, I like that, mate. I love that statement you made just there of the behaviours about the why. So why is someone doing it? What are they mentally thinking? What are they doing with the way that they're actually engaging with it? Even down to attitudinal type of elements, isn't it?
Yeah,
how are they
absolutely
operating it, and how are they engaging with it, which comes to the system. And the what is just the tool they're using to do the job.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. And what you're saying is that really where we need to start is why.
Yeah, absolutely. Every time.
That's cool. So go into it with, okay, well, why do we want people to engage with this, and what do we want them to be thinking and feeling as they're engaging with it? And then bring back to go, okay, well, how would they engage with that system, and how should we even deploy or work with that system to get that outcome? Yeah, that's neat. And then the final bit's the tool. That's the easy bit.
Yeah, that's the easy bit. Yeah, and we often start with that because it's the easy bit.
Yeah.
We replicate a tool that's been used somewhere else, possibly for something differently, or in an environment that's completely different, and then we don't consider the what and the why and wonder why the tool doesn't stick.
Yeah. Well, when you explain it like this, it's so simple. You know, it makes so much sense as to why it's been so troublesome and not worked so effectively in the past. Chris, with taking this approach of starting with the why, then the behavior, then coming down to the how of the system, and then the tool really is inconsequential. It'll come into play if it comes in, what comes into play. But how do you go about forming up a maturity index, your own assessment based on this? And there's another question I got on this too, but what's your thoughts on that?
So I think the key thing is to be really clear on the purpose. What is it that we want to achieve with the assessment system? Is it an audit and a checkup on people, or is it actually something that's meant to provide value and be something that people pull for? And key to that is be clear, is define who the customers are of the system, because it's not the continuous improvement team. It often is done that way. We need an assessment so that we can check how well people are doing the things we've told them to do, to be paraphrased. Whereas it shouldn't be. It's like, okay, the customers of this are the people in the business, so that we can help them to understand how to make further improvements. Or also help us to understand what is it that we've taught them that hasn't worked properly, because we might need to find a different way of teaching it. So who's the customer? When we're clear on who the customer is, sit down with them and talk about what is it they would really value most from an assessment system.
Yeah.
Voice of the customer activity, as you say in your own book. Let's understand what is the customers really would want as an output from this system.
Yeah.
And co-design it. Co-design with the customer so that they actually value the outputs from it.
Yeah. You're actually, in a way, mate, you're helping them create a vision in a way for the future of what excellence is for them that's aligned to their customer. And as you're doing it, you're honing in on the behaviors that we would need to be achieving excellence, and what the systems would be to enable that.
Oh, absolutely. You know some examples from your own background, and the way that you measure sales teams has a massive impact on the behavior within those teams.
Yeah, huge.
Okay? So that's just one example. That happens all over every organization, and it happens often because we just don't explicitly think about it.
Yeah.
We don't explicitly think about the design of the system in context of what are the behaviours we're looking for.
Mm. And Chris, the one thing I think what's so powerful with what you have done here in the book that you, Peter, and Morgan have written is that if we all talk about Toyota, okay, we talk about Toyota a lot. And if you think of what Toyota and team did, they didn't go out and come back and bring back the Ford operating system to Japan and say, they didn't call it the Ford operating system, and they didn't call it the Deming operating system or the Deming system. They came up their own way, which was based on their vision of the future, and they called it the Toyota way. And I know, mate, that you're working still with some major organizations in our world, and you've also worked with mid to small, and you're now helping them form up their way. It's not lean, it's not even agile, it's not Six Sigma, it's not Toyota, it's their way. There's power
Absolutely.
in that, mate. What is the power in that? In an organization not trying to just merely take something off the shelf and, put it through the organization, but taking the time to understand the voice of their customer, create that vision for the future, and build their own maturity index linked to that. What's the power of that?
Make it their own. Make it their own. Well, it makes it something that they own and value, and they can actually put their own language into it. Every organization has its own internal language and culture, and rather than cut and paste, you need to base things on principles and apply those principles into your organization. And there's some very, very valuable external assessments still. The ISO assessments, the Aldridge assessment, the Shingo assessments, they're all very useful assessments. And I'm not saying don't use them as well, because that external validation is really important. But the danger is if you only did them without actually building your own system, again, they might be seen as being done to people rather than being what you're doing for yourself to create your own system.
Yeah. I've experienced it too myself directly, Chris, where I won't name the assessment, but with an organization I was with, we got fired up about a particular external assessment, and we purely went down that external assessment path, which went very well. But a number of leaders changed. One or two new ones came in and they said, oh, no, we don't want to do that external assessment. We want to use this other model from over here. And all of a sudden, there's this different model coming down the company. But with the approach that you've written about and why bother, I'm predicting, and I'm also seeing with other organizations I know you're across, that's going to be very hard to do when the whole organization's come up their own way, their own language that includes the systems they've already got. They've just actually detailed them out to what would excellence be. It's going to be very hard for it to just be dropped and something else brought in.
I agree. It's part of embedding the culture in the organization. And I think things like the Shingo Prize assessment are fantastic to do as a verification of where you are on the journey, because you do need that external key as part of the assessment process is getting that external benchmarking insight as well.
Yeah.
But it gives you a very solid foundation to improve your culture if you create your own system in your own words and you're constantly applying plan, do, check, act to the system itself to constantly improve the system.
Yeah. Because the other thing I'm thinking about, Chris, with the book you've written, if a company is operating today and they're doing work today and they're still alive today, there's some good stuff in their company. It's not as if everything has to be brought in new, is it?
Absolutely not. No. It's always, every company has good stuff in there. So let's make sure we understand that good stuff and harness it and spread it. And it's far better to build. Let's build on the positives as much as just decry what's not working.
Yeah. I don't want to name a poor tennis player, but they may have an existing system that's been going quite well, some existing behaviours, but it's the B grade Brisbane tennis player comp, and we're going to help them. They help build up an assessment that's going to get them up to Roger Federer.
Absolutely.
Because often when it comes down to it, I think it's often the case that there's systems running in a company that can be good, but we're not measuring, are they getting better? And
No.
there's that other factor of the law of entropy, isn't it? That can play out too if something like that doesn't come into play, the old second law of thermodynamics.
Absolutely. And the other risk is that we focus on when something doesn't go as we'd hope. We focus on who rather than why. When we're looking at the system, when we're asking why, we're looking at what's gone wrong in the system rather than blaming the person, which is also really important.
Yeah. Chris,
very few people come to work to deliberately do a bad job. Most people want to do a good job. So we design the system to help them to do a good job or not.
Yeah. And Chris, I'm guessing too, mate, just on that conversation there, understanding root cause language and being able to use root cause thinking is so important on this type of journey too, isn't it? Like it's sort of it's a given, isn't it? Being able to actually look at the system and get to the root cause rather than stay at that blame type level.
Absolutely. And the other key thing that once we've got that, we looking at the system, we decided on it, we decided on the purpose, we look at the ideal behaviours, we design the system to try and support those ideal behaviours. What we then also need to do is introduce key behavioural indicators. So how are we monitoring the system the behaviours in the system on a day-to-day basis, not just whatever frequency we choose to do a formal assessment. So it's got, and the KPI reviews would be part of the formal assessment, but actually the KPIs are a daily assessment of how we're doing against our ideal behaviours.
Yeah, that's powerful. And we spoke a lot about that in our previous episode with, getting down to that KPI. But really what you're saying is the KPI gives you that short-term, daily, if not hourly gauge and energy that then supports the more mid-term review or assessment that's happening on the maturity model.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it gives you that multiple speed of energy to keep moving forward. Chris, in the book, you write about a lot of the skills and techniques of actually doing assessments. And I thought that was quite good because, you can do an assessment, and I do assessments, and they can be poor or they could be good. But what's very powerful in the book is you've actually given knowledge and expertise on how to do it, how to do calibration, how to do some amazing techniques, but then also how to continuously improve how you do assessments. Do you mind explaining that a little bit for our listeners?
I think I did a talk a few years back, and I had an amazing question from someone in the audience. And they said, should we apply continuous improvement to our continuous improvement process? And it sounds really obvious, but actually we often don't. So I said to him, that's the best question anyone's asked me. That's really superb thinking. And the answer is yes, we have to. We need to constantly look at what we're doing, how we're doing it, and why we're doing it, and is there a better way? So we build an assessment process. Now, if you think about a journey, it might be a 5-year journey. Is the assessment process in year 3 going to be exactly the same as in year 1? And if it is, it's unlikely to be hitting the mark. So what we need to be doing is refine it. Now, I don't say constantly changing it. You need a little bit of stability, but regular review. So maybe annually, right, what's the next phase in our journey? What's the purpose for the next 12 months in our journey? What do we need to adjust in the assessment system to make sure it's driving us in the right direction?
Yeah, that's cool. Continuous improvement for your continuous improvement program.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's logical, isn't it? But how often is it thought about?
Yeah.
And so really what you've written into the book is continuous improvement in relation to how you're assessing your continuous improvement journey also.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I know I've been on the receiving end of those from organizations that you've worked with, Chris, and I've valued every bit of feedback that I've gotten, mate. It's helped me improve and grow.
Well, that's the other great thing, you see. A good assessment is a learning opportunity for the assessors as much as the organization. So what's really good practice, and we talk about this in the book, is to actually include people in various levels around the business as part of the assessment team. Second them in to do assessments. Everyone that I've done that with has gone, oh, wow, that's a fantastic experience. I learned so much. And it's also part of the learning and development program, a good assessment system.
Yeah, definitely. Chris, we've spoken about, the why bother with assessments and, bringing those assessments or those reviews to behaviours and systems. And I love that element you spoke about with the why, how, what, focus on that. We've spoken about, the part of actually getting down to KPIs to have that constant daily fuel on it with the assessments after that. Now, we've also spoken about improving your assessment and actually continuously improving that you wrote about in the book, which is that whole review and reflection approach. Let's call an end to this episode and cover more about leadership and chat about some specifics with KPIs and KPIs in part 2. So thanks for a great episode, Chris. Thanks for helping us create a better future. We'll chat again next week. Bye for now.